everybody. Welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Sorry about last night. We were going to do a Tom King conversation, and at the last minute, things got tangled, and we had to postpone. We'll be doing that next Tuesday. But I'm very happy today to welcome Phillip Kennedy Johnson to Word Balloon. Long time coming, Phil. Good to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, John. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Congratulations. We're going to talk about a lot of books. And I wanted to start things off with your Aftershock graphic novel that's coming out in about 3 weeks, Kill a Man, MMA drama of sorts. So, I mean, with MMA, obviously there's going to be action, but a great story. I talked to Steve Orlando about it a few weeks ago.
I heard that.
To talk to you. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about it as well. I know it's based on a real boxing tragedy, and feel free to start with that and then tell us about the story that you've created from that historical tragic moment.
Yeah, totally. I've been anxious to talk to you about this book specifically because I know about your boxing cred. I just really excited to talk about that on the show. So it's a story about a top MMA contender named James Belly, who's actually a second generation fighter. And in the story, his father, DJ Belly, had been a pioneer of the sport 20 so years ago, and was killed tragically in the ring when he called his opponent a gay slur right before the fight and was beaten to death as a result.
Yeah.
By a prominent gay fighter named Xavier Maine, another pioneer. So 20 years later, DJ Belly's son, James Belly, is a top contender, a famous kickboxer, flashy, big mouth talker, and great fighter, who gets outed himself as gay in the presser before his own title shot. And as a result, he loses his fight camp, his endorsements, his organization, his fans, and has to kind of come back from nothing to get it all back. But the only trainer that'll touch him, the only person he can train with at that point is Xavier Maine, a guy who killed his dad a generation ago.
Yeah.
That's our story. We're super excited about it. And as you mentioned, it's inspired by the story of Emil Griffith, the famous, world-class boxer who in the 60s, I think, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Early 60s.
Killed his opponent in similar circumstance. Well, he not in the ring, but he never recovered from his wounds.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He died. He did die after the fight, Benny Paret, Kid Paret.
Right.
But it all happened because of the fact that it started with Paret calling Emil Griffith, a gay slur.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. It and really changed the way Griffith fought afterwards.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's other guys that had. I mean, there were other ring deaths prior to that. I mean, Max Baer Sr. Max Baer Sr. gets a raw deal in Cinderella Man, the Ron Howard film. And in fact, I was working in sports radio for the Sporting News Radio Network at the time, and we had Ron Howard on. And I made sure the morning show guys, not in any attacking way, but just asking Ron Howard, hey, Max Baer was not proud of killing two men in the ring.
Right.
It really upset him. And it was well documented. And I covered boxing for 16 years, so I kind of knew the true stories. And it's like, why did you do that? Wasn't the Depression and the era enough of a
villain, right?
Yeah, exactly, man.
Right.
Like,
I know you got to have I mean, I'm sure they wanted the big bad in the movie, and I get it. But yeah, for like the family of Max Baer, I'm sure it kind of sucked.
Yeah, and Max Baer Jr., of course, Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies. So I
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and I was and it's weird, man, because again, truth. Some people wonder if actually Max Baer Sr. had a brother, Buddy Baer, who both of them fought Joe Louis during the 30s, and a lot of people thought really Max Jr. was Buddy's son, and kind of a stage name to call himself Junior, but still enough in the family. And I just felt so bad because Max Jr. had been kind of saying in the press, look, I get it. No disrespect to Ron. He's a great filmmaker. I've been around Hollywood long enough. I know how this stuff works. But it is kind of disappointing that a lot of people are going to think my dad was an asshole instead of the great guy that he was. So I reached out to Jethro, and I'm just like, hey, man, come on and let's do a nice long interview. We did a nice hour interview. It's on my feed.
Oh my God,
if you saw the intro, the Big Bout podcast.
Yeah, I did.
It's one of my interviews over there. I want to do more boxing history. So forgive me for the long tangent, but yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, honestly, and have you seen that Emil Griffith documentary that they made about like 15 or 20 years ago? Yeah, man, Jesus. I mean, just heartfelt. And I mean, good Lord. And for people who haven't seen it, you really should seek it out. And Griffith went to the Pere family and had this like very sad, but understandingly closure kind of meeting with his son.
Right.
And he's like, God, I'm so sorry. And and the kid's saying, oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. And it was this really beautiful moment. And it's tough. So I really appreciated that once I read your guys' description of the story. I'm like, oh, this is good. I'm like, this is sad, but it's there's some real emotion.
It is sad. Honestly, I have to give Steve the credit for coming up with the concept. Steve Orlando, my co-writer, and nice comment from someone.
Yeah. Ed Cato says he's looking forward to reading it, and he liked my interview with Steve a little while back. Jose Morales also very nice.
Yeah, it's Steve and I met at Albany Con. For those who don't know, Steve Orlando is the co-writer on the book, and we crossed paths a couple of times, just sort of in passing. We never really met, and then we were both tabling at Albany Con, where Ron Mars is a mutual friend, and Ron had been talking up that show forever, and so I went up there, and it was great. It was really fun. They treated us great. Awesome fans. And that night, the first night there, Steve suggested we all go to this like sports bar or whatever in town. It's like a local place, and there was a fight on. And
cool.
We just ate wings till we died and watched fights. And Steve had recently become a fan of him. I guess he was a wrestling fan from way back, but he had recently become an MMA fan. And so we kind of bonded on that. I threw shade on wrestling, and we talked about MMA, which I was really fun because I got the impression he had just recently, like within the past year, had started to get into it. And I have been a martial arts fan forever and had always kind of wanted to get into it and never quite, I shouldn't say I had never had the opportunity, but it just always kind of got eclipsed by the things, or I was living in places where there wasn't like a good place around, or it's never really worked out. I got my first martial arts experience in basic training when I joined the Army.
Oh, wow.
And just really fell in love with it. And so when I got out, I'm not out, I'm in now, but when I got out of training, I found, by my first, my duty station, I found a Kempo place where I studied, started to do like karate forms and did Hapkido, and all that was great, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. Like I wanted something more like, practical and applicable on, on the street or in a parking lot or wherever. I just wanted something like really practical. And I started exploring boxing actually, and did some of that. And around that same time, my neighbor was this huge MMA guy. He was always getting these pay-per-views. So I went over there and watched my first MMA fight, like a UFC pay-per-view event. And I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And it was this amazing stuff. It was just everything I wanted,
Cool.
And you got to see people who had real boxing cred, but also, doing double leg takedowns and like, being able to wrestle on the ground too. And it was just people that could do everything. I was just so impressed. And then I started, pursuing jujitsu and doing different things.
Wow.
So I got to really geek out with Steve. And not long after that, he told me about this concept that he'd had. I don't know if he had seen, I got the impression he had seen the Emil Griffith documentary by that point, and also was like super in love with the movie Creed, and he just had this concept for a story they wanted to tell. And he knew that how into MMA I am, and he wanted to co-write it with me. So we did. So it's a story about LGBTQ identity, about what it would be like to be a part of that in a scene like MMA, where being, male and queer is kind of not a thing right now.
Yeah.
And just explore what would happen, and sure. With the drama of the Emil Griffith story where he, killed a man and was haunted by it. So yeah, I was all in on the story, and we both wanted it to be super authentic. So Steve had all these relationship things and family beats that he wanted to deal with in the story. So that's as authentic as it gets. And I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to say. I've been wanting to do an MMA book forever anyway. I loved Heart when that came out with Blair Butler.
Yes. And Kevin Miller. Yeah. No, I I talked to Brett way back when that came out. And I'm surprised that there aren't more MMA books, Phil.
There's like nothing. I mean, you'll see the occasional thing at a show. If you go to a convention, you'll see like small press stuff.
Sure.
Like sometimes it's like a mashup, like a horror MMA thing or something, but it's not very often. Actually, great fighter,
Mike Kingston too, with his wrestling comics,
right?
Well,
that, and let me think. I want to say Nate Quarry, the fighter. I think he might have actually done a book.
Oh,
he was a big MMA. He was in one of those first fights that I watched, and since then he does different stuff now, but he's kind of in the nerd scene. I want to say he actually did a book. I need to look that up and see. I might be making that up, but
comic or a novel?
Comic. Sorry,
No. It's all
I know
good.
I've seen him post stuff about comics before, and I want to say there's some kind of a zombie thing that he did. But he's definitely in the scene in some regard. Anyway, so yeah, you're right. There's just not a lot of sports books in general. There's been a few, but not like there was Boom did this great fencing book. There have been some others since then. But MMA specifically is something I wanted to see.
Sure.
And so we made it just as authentic as hell. I mean, things that I think like kind of shines a light on some of the shortcomings of MMA, like behind the scenes, I think kind of, is a little bit shady, but also just the way the fighters are, the way they train, just the way the business works a little bit. I don't know. I'm just, inspired and fascinated by the whole scene. And I can't wait for you to read this book.
That's awesome. Scott Crosby, a Muay Thai practitioner.
Yeah.
He wants to see more martial art comics. Dennis, I apologize. You literally just missed what brought Phil and Steve together, so I'm not going to make Phil repeat it. That's the beauty of rewind. So at the end of the conversation,
it's in there,
yeah, I promise you, within the first 10 minutes, you will get that story. So that's
chicken wings and UFC pay-per-view.
Yeah, there you go. That's the shorthand. There's the cliff notes for you. Exactly. No, and I'll even confess, Phil, because I enjoy watching the occasional MMA, but my old mentor when it came to boxing writing, Bert Sugar, I'm like, what do you think of MMA? He's like, it's an invented sport. It's a little bit of karate, a little bit of Muay Thai, a little bit of wrestling, a little bit of boxing. Make up your mind.
I mean, aren't all sports invented?
I love the way he said it, though. Make up your mind.
Yeah, I totally get that. I've heard that. I've heard that from boxing coaches too. That feel like it's just it's all bullshit, and they just don't get it.
Truly, not that it's bullshit, but just it's just like what I don't know. I don't like the fact one set of rules, and I'm like, I get it, and especially for an older guy, I can appreciate where he's coming from, and certainly I grew up on the tradition of boxing, and I'll admit that I've been watching a hell of a lot more boxing. It's interesting how one of the most contact sports, two of the most contact sports, and then throw wrestling in there as well. They were like among the first ones to come back during all this COVID craziness,
right?
More so than any other sport and everything. It was like, hey, welcome back.
It's just two guys in a hole together, right? So it's easier to, if you get these guys to, exactly, as opposed to two teams of dudes.
Well, that's been very true. You're right about that. Although occasionally, I don't know about an MMA, but there've been a few boxing things that since they started fighting in the bubbles and stuff, they had to postpone or get other opponents or even just cancel because one guy or a guy in the team ended up getting it. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, this is kind of what we're dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I get it. But yeah, as far as the what your old mentor said is true. Like this sport is young, and the evolution of it is what kind of fascinates. Well, one of the things that fascinates me about it is how it started out as this tournament thing. Like, let's see who would win between a fight. It's like the comic book thing, like Wolverine versus Batman or whatever. Like who's going to win? So they would put in sumo wrestler against a boxer, or kung fu guy against an American kickboxer or whatever.
Like a Bruce Lee movie, absolutely,
totally, and not even weight classes at first. Just two randos. And, and now, I mean, those people who were killing it at the beginning were just strict discipline, just one note guys. And now not to say there's nobody like that. I mean, I'm sure there are people who started out that way as just jiu-jitsu guys who started working on their hands and get in there and just try to get them on the ground the whole time. But primarily it's people who do it all.
Right.
And I love that. I love how far it's come, where now it's like it really has become its own martial arts style, even though it's just kind of, it pulls from everything.
And Dana White, for being such a, I mean, he, again, he's, as is the case with a lot of promoters, there's a good side, there's a big bad side and a big
yeah, there is.
But I give him credit because I remember when in the 90s it was, as you say, just like, okay, sumo versus, karate guy and everything, and how crazy it was. When I worked in sports radio, people would call and go, how come you're not talking more about MMA? Because they'd let me talk boxing. And I'm like, well, it's only legal in 2 states.
Right.
I'm like, so maybe that makes it a little more brutal.
Well, honestly, that's justified, or it was. I mean, it's back then, no weight classes, no rounds even. Like it was just like a half an hour straight, or maybe just until somebody like dies, basically.
Well, that's how boxing was before the Marcus of Queensberry rules. I mean, rounds would end when a guy would get knocked out in the John L. Sullivan, bare knuckle time. You like the pantomime? That's good.
Yeah, the Notre Dame guy. Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I mean, the only rules in the beginning was like no fish hooking, I think no nut shots, and I think maybe eye gouges. Maybe even that was okay. Like I think eye gouges might have been a rule, and that's literally it. So I totally get when they were talking about human cockfighting and all that was one, at one point that was fair.
But Dana's one of those guys that like went to the commissions, and it's like, all right, let's sit down and let's come up with some rules that will be acceptable to you, and let me make this sport what I think it could be.
Right.
And again, I mean, the guy's got an iron grip on it. I know Bellator exists. In fact, I don't know if Bellator still has their offices in Chicago or not. They did for
I don't know. Yeah, they're still a thing and still doing great. I know it's not getting the press the UFC does, but they're still very strong.
Yeah. No, and it's, again, I give them credit for becoming a real sport and being as popular as it is, and taking advantage of, I think, 2 of the negative sides of boxing and wrestling in terms of, again, the scripted side of wrestling. Sometimes boxing is just 12 rounds of 2 guys hugging each other. And, it kind of forces action being 5 rounds and the way they've structured the role. So no, I get it. And I've seen some great MMA fights. It's a ridiculous movie, but I love Kevin James' movie, Here Comes the Boom. I think it's a lot of fun.
I haven't seen that yet, but
really?
It does look fun. Yeah,
it is. I went into, I'm like, all right, we'll see. But I ended up really enjoying it. Kevin James, I got to say again, at my sports radio station, he came very early, I think maybe in the first season of King of Queens, and endeared himself to our whole station in terms of what a sweet guy he was.
I've heard that. He's great.
Yeah, we're like, oh, he's a nice guy. All right, let's watch his show. And then it was like, oh, okay, it's funny. Good for him, man. So it's funny. But yeah, MMA, like I said, I'm excited that boxing is back. In fact, I didn't realize Friday night, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. has a fight, but Senior is fighting an exhibition on the card as well.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, I'll see. I mean, again, I'm sure they'll be padded up. I'm sure they'll have headgear on or whatever. And it's funny. I'm sure you've heard the Tyson Roy Jones matchup that's coming. What do you think of that?
I mean, honestly, I don't know, man. It could be. Tyson's my favorite boxer ever. I mean, as a fighter, he's.
Yeah, I understand. No.
He's a legend. Like when I would love to see him, and I've seen tape of him, working the bag, looking incredible. It's unbelievable. But I don't know. It could go either way. I don't love seeing my heroes come out and get tossed around when they're really too old to be in there. So I don't want to see him come in there and look like crap. But if he looks like Tyson, I'd be thrilled with it.
Yeah, I'm of 2 minds as well, because as you said, he looks great in his workouts, and he looked great hitting the mitts. But it's like, the mitts don't hit back. Let's see what happens. And also, it's all about the legs, as I'm sure it is too with MMA.
Right.
And truly, that's what brought Roy Jones down to earth as he got older and started getting knocked out. He lost his speed, and because he never had real defensive handwork. All of his defense came from his legs and juking back and forth and slipping punches. And once that leg work, kind of died, then he was a target and literally was getting knocked out. And it's like, okay, but I do think both guys are looking at this in the right way of we're putting on a show. It's funny, they had a marathon of the Rocky movies on, I think, one of the BBC America or whatever. And I remember in the first film when Rocky knocks Apollo down in the first fight and everything, and Tony Burton gets in Apollo's face. He's like, he thinks this, he doesn't know it's a show. He thinks it's a fight. Get this guy out of here and let's go home. This guy's dangerous. And truly, I mean, that's the thing. So, this is going to be an exhibition. I would have liked to have seen Holyfield because I think it would have been more evenly matched. I'm a little worried about Roy being a small, I mean, he won a heavyweight belt when he fought John Ruiz, but John Ruiz was like, he had one of the 4 belts and was probably arguably the 6th best heavyweight at the time, even though he held one, he had beaten Holyfield in a freak decision and stuff. And it's like, that doesn't make Roy Jones a heavyweight fighter. But I've heard Mike in the interviews promoting this thing. I think they're both in the right, frame of mind. But that said, even Ali and Marciano, when they had their filmed super fight, even then, like Marciano and Ali reflexively would like throw a real punch. Mm-hmm. And of course, get a punch in return, and it's like, hey, exhibition, easy guys, easy. Right. So again, again, especially a guy like Mike Tyson, who, bad intentions, as they say. That's how he punches. So I'm a little worried about Roy. I got to be honest. I'm a little more worried about Roy than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we should be. I don't really know I don't know Roy like I do Mike Tyson. I mean, I haven't seen as much tape on him.
Okay.
I got a little bit of boxing from my dad when I was a kid. He bought in college or something. Fought in college. I don't think he did a whole lot of it. Okay. And we were out in the sticks of Iowa. There was there was nothing else. I was getting picked on. And he taught me some stuff, and I was like really young. But I did but we also watched a little bit of tape. And when he was young, he was really into Rocky Marciano. He's an older guy. He's like in his 80s now. When he was a young man, he loved Rocky Marciano because he was the man back then. And I remember watching Dad had somehow got a hold of like a VHS of some Marciano tape. And I remember being super impressed with him at the time. Because I mean, what I remember, I need to go back and watch some tape again. But now in my mind, he's like this Wolverine guy that wasn't really covering up very much. He would just take it on the chin and it was just hit super hard. I just remember seeing him like knock down guys a lot and not really a lot of defense from what I remember, and not really moving all that fast.
Nope.
But he literally never lost.
Right. He threw himself. I mean, he was also a small heavyweight.
Right.
And really more like Roy Jones than Mike Tyson in terms of size, but it was all power. It came from the legs as well, much like Tyson. And he just, like you said, he waded in because he had no choice. From a reach advantage, he had like 66 inches, which is nothing for a heavyweight.
Totally. So
he had no choice but get inside and come up from below and everything, and that's how he would win. And every fight was just a war. And I mean, God, Joe Walcott was old, but Joe Walcott was a great defensive and offensive fighter. Gave Joe Louis all he could handle in the 2 fights they had. Ezra Charles was very much in the same vein as Evander Holyfield later, in terms of being like one of the best light heavyweights ever, and then did incredibly well as a heavyweight and doesn't get the attention that he deserved coming after Joe Louis. And again, I'm throwing up all these names, kind of a Larry Holmes situation coming after Ali, where as great as Larry Holmes was, didn't get the press that obviously Ali did. So it's and again, probably because we're talking about a sport that had like 130 years of history now. When you look at it, and everything, I'm just completely fascinated by all the different eras, all the different fighters. Mike, one of our viewers, was mentioning that me talking to Bert Sugar in general is what got him to look into previous eras of boxing. Henry Armstrong, an incredible lightweight champion that had held the featherweight, lightweight, and welterweight titles simultaneously, and had a draw for the middleweight title. I mean, this guy was amazing. I
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, hammer and hammer.
Yeah, I don't have nearly your background. The tape that I remember watching vividly when I was younger, all the way through like college. I remember seeing like some of that Rocky Marciano stuff, and then seeing Ali later, and so because to me that's like what Marciano was doing is what boxing was, like just a grudge match, like just super heavy hands, being able to take it on the chin. that's what I equated with boxing. And then later I saw Ali fight, where it's like you're seeing an athlete like with crazy footwork, and honestly, and theatricality, just completely different. And then when I saw Tyson, that was like a revelation. Where it's like because I mean, by that point I had started like learning to fight myself a little bit, and I was, I have to remind myself not to just throw arm punches where you're just kind of going like from here, to really like put your body behind it. Something I hear feedback like, don't just throw from your shoulder. And Tyson was like the anti that, where he was just, his whole body was behind everything, and his head movement was crazy. How fast he would move, and how all over the place he was. Just him. I was like, how does anyone hit this guy?
Yes.
And then he would just put his whole body behind a hook and just flatten it, or those uppercuts was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's to me now is like when I epitomize a boxer in my mind, it's Tyson. I see he's incredible.
That's cool. Do you spar still?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I do. I do that. I do some Muay Thai, and some jiu-jitsu as well. I mean, lately I'm working a bag mostly. I'm working a bag because because of COVID, I'm working a bag, and I am
absolutely,
and I'm teaching my son also. Like he and I,
awesome.
every day I'll hold pads for him. We'll do like some focus mitt work with boxing stuff. I'll hold Thai pads for him to work on some kicks and some other stuff. And we have mats downstairs to do some jiu-jitsu. But I'm a little training dummy, and depending on, he's still real small. So depending on what we're doing, he'll either use the dummy or do stuff on me. So that's the extent of my training right now. But
that's cool. I've fooled around in the ring, and I emphasize fooled. I had a lot of great boxing people that kind of taught me, just a little bit of interesting knowledge here and there. And my buddy Doug Buffone, the former linebacker for the Bears, he would work out with a heavy bag, and even would play around in the ring. And he'd go, Johnny, just like literally, just like throw punches like this, and just go full extension for 3 minutes. And take a minute off, and then do it again for another 3 minutes, and it'll give you an idea of how
tired right now.
And I'm like, I get it, man. That's great. So yeah, I have tremendous respect for combat sport people. I think it's a great workout, and it's Jesus. There's two sides to it, as I'm sure you feel, Philip, in terms of, again, it's dramatic as those fights are. They're incredibly dangerous as well. And we're learning more and more about things like CTE. In fact, when Ali died, and I know it's against his religion, but I almost had hoped that they would do an autopsy on him and see if he had CTE damage. A good friend of mine, her father was a heart specialist in Chicago here at Northwestern University Hospital. And I remember during, God, and again, this is showing my age, I think it was the 84 Olympics, where we were watching him at his house. And he's like, you really like boxing, don't you, John? And I said, yeah, I really do. And he's like, I got to tell you, I've seen CAT scans of Ali's head. And he goes, there's so much trauma from all those punches he took. And he goes, sure, that's why Ali's slowing down. And this was, in the 80s, when he wasn't as hurt by his Parkinson's syndrome as he became as he got older and stuff. I mean, he was definitely slowing down, but as he got older, my God, the poor man was just trapped in his body. I mean, that's really the real tragedy was his mind was fine. And I mean, and again, if you would be patient with him and everything, I got to interview him in the early 90s when George Foreman fought Evander Holyfield. And he, stammered a bit and everything, and it took a while for it to get out. But his analysis of the fight was dead on. And it was just like, he's like, George is going to surprise you. And he goes, I'm not saying this is like old guys, getting together and picking on the young guy. He goes, I'm just telling you, he goes, George is a different fighter. He goes, he takes his time. He goes, and he's got a hand speed that he didn't show back in the 70s. He's like, George has really changed his style. And he goes, and he's a mountain. He goes, it's not going to be easy for Evander to chop this guy down. He goes, I'm not saying he's going to win. He goes, but it won't surprise me if George has a really good performance. And good Lord, there's a fight that's on YouTube waiting for you to watch. If, people watching, I figured you've seen it. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, hey, man. And then, of course, a couple of years later, George ends up winning the title.
I know. It's crazy. I still remember that. What a crazy thing it was.
He was like this big bully in the 70s and kind of played to that. And then all of a sudden in the 90s, he's smiling. I got to interview him several times during his career and after when he was just an analyst. Tremendous guy. And seriously, like, the mind of any great strategist. I mean, you'd want George Foreman in your corner because he really understood the sport, and it was really a pleasure. And to the point, because a lot of times on HBO he'd be like this goofball, and literally one of the times I turned off my recorder and I'm like, hey, I like this George Foreman that I'm talking to right now. What's with the clown on HBO? And he's like, they don't need me to be the smartest guy in the room. He goes, Larry Merchant, he knows his stuff. Jim's there to be the play-by-play guy. I'm there to be silly. He goes, that's my role. I'm totally content. He goes, I don't mind when I'm talking to a real fight guy. He's like, I'll get serious. He said, but no, he goes, on TV, I'm there to be the clown. And I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, cool.
Go make a grill.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, Killer Man is great.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely, man. No, the Aftershock guys were kind enough to send it to me, and I really think it's terrific. Tell me about your artist on it.
Oh man, so it's Alec Morgan, and I had not worked with Alec before. Steve worked with him on Midnighter before, okay. And Steve knew that he had also trained MMA, so he has knowledge of combat sports that we were looking to make this really authentic book about MMA, and it's sorry, I'm reading the note.
Yeah, we're gonna get to Last Guide. I want to talk about that next.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. We wanted somebody who could bring the same authenticity to the art. And, when sometimes I'll make MMA references and send like photo ref or a video clip or something when I'm trying to get an idea across to a specific fight, like to a move or something. And with Alec, I can just say double leg takedown. He knows just what I mean. Or I can refer to a specific fight, talk about a Mirko Krokop head kick or whatever. And he knows just what I mean. So it's really great. We really wanted these big, spreads for the fight scenes that are a little just unusual as far as the layouts, and Alex crushing it. So he's got this kind of rough style that just suits the story we're telling, So Alec was a really good choice, and Steve brought him in. That's great, man. No,
I like the stark art design, and I think the coloring is really great on it. It works. It works for the story. You can go classical, high powered illustration that's very realistic. But I like the impressionist style for this.
Yeah, me too. That turned out really nice.
Absolutely. So there's a few other current books that we want to get to, but Dennis said he's got to go, but wants to understand how Last God came together at DC. Did you pitch it, or was it a DC idea? And who's the editor on the book?
The editor is Amadeo Torturo, and he's a great dude. I actually worked with him on my first DC book, which was an Aquaman annual.
Oh.
Brian Cunningham actually is the one who brought me into DC. He discovered me through Last Sons of America, which I did at Boom Studios. Asked if I wanted to pitch something else at DC, and I was like, yes, I do. And we ended up settling on Aquaman. And Amadeo was the assistant editor and the one that I had the most interaction with on that book. Had a really good relationship. The book turned out nice. And Amadeo started doing more stuff at Vertigo and on some books that would become black label books. And he reached out to me. He was like, hey, would you want to do something at Vertigo? I'm like, yeah. Vertigo is like my jam.
Sure.
And he said, so when he's not doing, like Amadeo is really creative, great dude. And when he's not doing comics, he really loves tabletop gaming. And he was like, would you want to do a horror story in a world where there's wizards and shit? Like that was the quote. Like exactly those words. And I was like, dude, yeah, you're, get out of my brain. Like, what are you going to say to that? So so to that degree, it was a DC idea. Like that was the pitch that they gave to me.
Okay.
And then I took that and I came up with a fully fledged idea that I wanted to then bring back to them. It's like, what do you think of this? And as a relatively new dad, I wanted to tell most of my stories are about either America or about my son in some way.
Okay.
And I want to tell a story about the lies we tell our kids, basically, like the version of ourselves that we want to show our children, and how we all try our best by our kids, and we all ultimately fail in some way. And there's something that our kids want to do better than us. And, there are ways in which I felt failed, and I'm trying not to fail my own son. And I want to explore that in a big high concept genre kind of way. So I basically had an idea for a fellowship, kind of in the vein of Lord of the Rings. But what if they failed? And what if these heroes supposedly saved the world and became the rulers of their world and everything, but it was all big lie.
Okay.
And that lie eventually came back to haunt them later in a big, meaningful way. So that story kind of became two stories where we're following this fellowship of supposed heroes, like the saviors of this world. And then we see another group of heroes a generation later who are kind of forced to redeem the sins of their predecessors and, try to do what their saviors said that they did, So the story constantly was back and forth between these two different time periods in this high fantasy world, a very harsh place. It is inspired by Tolkien, but also by Robert E. Howard. It's a much more harsh place than we're used to. Like we wanted to have, familiar races and concepts that tabletop gamers and fantasy fans could latch onto and recognize, but not fit in the mold that they're used to. So like there's a version of the elves in this world, but they're not shiny and happy and superior and immortal. They're a downtrodden, subjugated race. The Aboriginal people of this place that were eventually overthrown and now are, some of them are enslaved, others are just seen as animals, and they are better than the humans in some ways, but also it's just a totally different scene. I wanted to have just more grown up concepts of society and religions, like different religions. One thing I always kind of wanted to see in Tolkien's world, never did, was different religions in different cultures that kind of clash. Like the concept of religion never really is a thing in those stories, except for the fact that if you read the Silmarillion, you see, the capital T truth of what actually is there as far as a god, but you don't see religions the way I would like to see them. So we see a lot of that in this world. We see like every culture and race has several religions, and they're not the same. They conflict, and the whole world is just a much messier scene than what I usually see in fantasy.
Sure.
So yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's what it is. It's a story of two fellowships separated by 30 years, both trying to do essentially the same thing. And we see their wins and failures, and it's really a great time.
Yeah, honestly, I love when DC or Marvel step away from superheroes and really do get inventive. And I like these left of center books that come out. So I think that's great. And what you just said about religion, I almost wonder, would you ever want Marvel to do something with Thor? Recently, and when I say recently, I guess it was probably within the last 10 years, it was during Jurgen's run where they stumbled on real Vikings that really, or at least Viking descendants that still believed in Thor as a god and an earth god rather than the Asgardian alien god that they represent and everything. And it's like, that's really, I like when they do interesting things like that with Thor. And I think that's a real interesting vein to mine as far as
I definitely agree. I would love to explore the concept of divinity if I were given a shot at that book. I love what Jason Aaron did with the God Butcher.
Of course,
his run. That
was
beautifully done. It's a very cosmic take on divinity. It wasn't just like Earth religions like you're talking about, but
still, yes.
My friend Rom V, who's doing stuff at both Marvel and DC, that had a really interesting take.
Yeah,
had a really interesting take on Thor. I wrote the Captain America Empyre tie-in.
I wanted to talk about that as well. Absolutely, man.
Oh, thanks. Rom did one for Thor that had a really interesting religious take. That would have been really fun to see. Unfortunately, it was one that got cut because of the COVID stuff. But yeah, I thought he had a really fun take on that, and I would love. That's basically a similar take that I would explore too if I was brought to that book.
That's cool, man. Let's get into the Cap Empyre arc wrapped up. That's cool, man, and that's great. And I didn't realize your military background, so that I'm sure you felt very at home. Right.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, getting the right Cap is a dream come true. I mean, Cap embodies the Army values that soldiers are all expected to live by. So
I'm
getting
not like an asshole, by the way, because complete civilian doughboy, doughy
no,
shit. So, yeah, I understand. Of course, yes. Please go on. Yes.
no, man, you're good. Yeah, Cap. Yeah, just an honor to write him, and but it's a lot of pressure too because I know a lot of soldiers and veterans read him, and even those who are even just civilians that love him. Like they want to see. A lot of people are very opinionated about what they expect to see Cap do and what they want to come out of his mouth.
Sure.
And you want to, when you're putting the person that personifies the American Army on paper to be read by thousands and thousands of people, it's a big deal. So I took it seriously, and I honestly some of the research I did for that book was just rereading what I consider to be very powerful speeches by people like FDR and or even Cronkite, just things that we kind of associate with America, that when somebody speaks, like the kind of speeches where you speak and then we kind of shuts up and listens. And I try to capture that when Cap speaks. I want him to. The thing about Cap is that I was telling somebody else at Marvel this. Cap is not Superman. He's not this perfect person from modern day. He is the perfect soldier from the 30s. And so whenever he speaks, there should be like a dated quality to it, I think. He's kind of an alien here. And he should be kind of out of touch in certain ways. And even without making him too out of touch, he should at least sound dated and like a tiny bit hokey when he talks in a way that just reminds you, oh yeah, this guy's actually 90
from another era. Absolutely.
Yeah.
My favorite, and it's literally one page of Frank Miller's Daredevil Born Again. But I don't, you're starting to smile, so maybe you know what I'm talking about. He's looking up information about Nuke.
Oh yeah.
It's on a computer, and and I think it was probably like a narration box. Like he's frustrated that he's looking on a computer, and like for a second is an old man,
right?
And then it's like, all right, back to the task. I don't need to really focus again. But that's Captain America, man.
Exactly.
And I loved Brubaker when during House of M, and they got to do that amazing issue where Cap gets to age, and you see what his life was like, and then of course they touch on it on Endgame as well. And I love that ending of that.
I know. Totally. That's beautifully done. I can't believe how well they stuck the landing on such a long series. Seeing Cap old like that was great. Seeing in the Brubaker run, I'm pretty sure it's Brubaker. You see him running or getting back from a run or doing some kind of PT, and he's wearing Army PTs that at the time was our PT uniform.
Oh wow.
I just love that. I love seeing just reminders of he's still a soldier. He still, gets his paycheck same day as we do. I want to hear him using little like bits of Army lingo, even though now like it will be different because he's so old, but there's still stuff that he would be expected to know now. It was such a short series, only 3 issues, so I didn't have a chance to really dig deep into all that. But I was looking for opportunities to do anything like that I could, because I really want the soldiers to look at Cap and say, like, yeah, he's ours.
That's awesome, man. Have you ever met Jason Inman?
Yes, I have. Yeah, he and I met at the DC thing a couple like last year before.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, dude's super cool, and he and I have been in touch actually a few times. There's for those who don't know, my other gig outside of comics is with the Army Field Band in DC.
I didn't know that. Holy shit!
Playing trumpet with the Army, and it's cool. It's one of the big groups in DC, and we tour a lot. And we incorporate video in our program. Sometimes we do themed concerts, and there was we were getting ready to do a superhero show, and I was going to get Jason to actually speak on there as like just have an interview on there with him talking about the overlap between the U.S. military in general and a lot of the superheroes that we know and love. And the obvious example of that's Cap. Not just because of who Cap is, but also because of who Jack Kirby was, and how he himself was a veteran, and I wanted to talk about Kirby and also about Audie Murphy and about some of the inspirations that came from Capt from Audie Murphy's own career.
Audie Murphy guy, absolutely, man. Jeez.
So yeah, Jason and I have been in touch a good bit.
That's great, man. No, and I, people who know the name, and certainly you've seen Jason on Word Balloon video and audio.
Right.
Jason wrote Super Soldiers, which is a great look at a lot of characters that have army and military background.
Right. It's a great book.
Tell me about the band? Are you playing jazz? Are you playing orchestra? Or what are you playing?
It's my job is primarily with a concert band. So it's like a symphony orchestra, but with band instruments.
Cool.
We occasionally march, but not very often. We lead the presidential inaugural parade every 4 years.
Wow.
So that's cool. But
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Sitting in the office. That's fucking amazing.
Yeah. But outside of that, we mostly play concerts for the American people around the country,
Yeah. No, that's incredible, man.
Yeah, it's good. So that's the job. They've been really great about letting me do comics though. Like as the comic thing has taken off, they've been really understanding and even let me showcase some of my own stuff a little bit. Like I write music for some of my comics as well, including Last God.
Really?
Yeah, sheet music sometimes shows up in my books.
So, okay, have you gotten with a, composer or somebody to create an actual soundtrack?
Yeah, I write the music myself and play some of it also. And when it's for stuff I don't play, like strings or whatever, I'll bring in friends to play.
So is there an MP3 of music from Last God that we can? Wow.
Yeah, totally. I'll send you something. There's
and also, Jesus. I mean, is it on iTunes? How would people look for that?
You can find, let's see, on my social media and also on social media and on YouTube, my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You can
channel, Phil?
It's just my name, just Phillip Kennedy Johnson.
Okay, great.
And there's a button to it. There's also phillipkennedyjohnson.com, all one word, and there's a YouTube, just like a button, I think, at the bottom for the YouTube channel.
Okay.
And there's a couple of these. Basically, I made trailers for the first few issues of the book that include music that I wrote for the book, and some of that actually appears in the comic. Like in the back, there's 4 pages of back matter at the back of every issue. That includes there's all this world building stuff, like journal entries or bits of old sacred texts or songs that appear in the running text of the book. Sheet music that you can actually play and read, or sheet music like this in world that you have to decode to play if you want to. I kind of went nuts. But yeah, some of those songs we actually recorded and put in the trailers.
That's fantastic. Dave Gibbons had his great Vertigo series, The Originals. And it was about the mods from the early 60s. And, they were the scooter guys, and their music was very specific of its era and stuff. And totally. I'm and especially given that it's a Warner Brothers book, I'm like, Dave, you got to put together a soundtrack of real mod music from the era. And he's like, oh, that'd be great. Or at least a playlist or something, throw it up on Spotify or something like that. I love that Alex Segura does that for his detective books.
Yeah.
P. Fernandez and stuff. And no, I do. I think that's really incredible. Or God, Jeff Lemire. And I always forget the name of Gordy, the guy from Tragically Hip that passed away young.
I don't know.
But they did a book called Secret Path. And they created a soundtrack about it, and it's a true story, sadly, about the indigenous people of Canada and how sometimes they received cruel treatment from the Catholic Church and trying to really forcibly take kids from their homes and get them into the Catholic religion. It's a really sad story, and they made this concept album to go along with the graphic novel, and I mean. Again, as someone that's slightly older, and maybe you guys are doing it too in your generation, but man, now I really feel like an old man. But you used to put up an album and just sit there with the giant album and look at the art and just play it and read.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I've got that stuff. I've got old LPs. Yeah, I used to play with the Glenn Miller band. I know about that stuff.
That's fantastic! Wow, that's I wish my father were listening right now. He'd be thrilled because that was his guy, man. It's hilarious, man. I'm in my mid-50s. And suddenly I'm like, all right, I still love a lot of 80s music. And I'm like, I'm exactly like my father was in the 80s. I love big band stuff from the 40 years earlier. And I'm like,
right.
Jesus Christ. I am my father. Oh my
That
God.
was a fun gig, man. And the people that show up, there was a lot of older people that came, but there was also, I mean, honestly, primarily older people who like grew
Sure.
up with music, but also there's a lot of young people that were starting to dig it again. It was a very, very rewarding job.
I mean, just the way he could arrange music and just, really swing. Every music era is fascinating. In fact, literally a week ago on my public television station, they were rerunning the Ken Burns country music documentary.
Oh, sweet.
And I forgot how much I loved it. And it's funny because Jason Aaron always like gives me crap about like, you don't give country music enough of a chance, John. And I'm like, okay, and I really loved it. And I love Burns's jazz documentary.
Yeah, that was a great doc.
And really, man, I'm a radio guy, and I started off as a music DJ before I got into talk. So I am fascinated by all the different eras of music and everything. So cool. It's amazing that you were in the Glenn Miller band. That's wonderful, man.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun. I'm glad I did it. It's hard living though. It's a hard gig. But the Army Field Band that I'm with now is actually kind of similar in that there's a lot of touring.
Okay.
But the tours are not all the time. Like with the Miller Band, you never go home hardly.
Yeah.
A couple weeks off a year, and with the Army Field Band, usually when COVID's not happening, we're touring about a third of the year.
Okay. Do you guys cut albums and stuff?
We do.
That's great.
Yeah, we just did one. We just recorded one at Skywalker Sound.
Wow.
Called Soundtrack of the American Soldier that just dropped this last month. Featuring a lot of music from films that are about, U.S. military, essentially. We have the Legacy series, which we take a famous composer, primarily American composers, and do an album about their stuff. We did one for Bernstein and Copeland. And
wow.
Let me think. Who else? What is recent ones? They're very proud to be a part of all that stuff.
Phil, that's amazing. Seriously, I'm so glad that you mentioned this. I had no idea about this side of your work and everything.
Oh,
that's
thanks.
Terrific. Yeah.
Well, this is the show to talk about it on. I've always been impressed with how much you know about so many different things. Like when I hear you like doing movie trivia and stuff, I'd get smoked on this show.
I think I'm planning a horror movie contest for this Friday.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm hoping that I'm just gonna MC. I'm not gonna. I admit my faults in terms of not knowing. I don't know. I'm a wuss when it comes to horror. It's like
I might do marginally better with that, but not much.
No, but I am an old Hollywood guy. Well, I grew up in that 5-channel era when for years we didn't have cable, and had a bunch of old relatives. It's like, oh, you got to watch this Sherlock Holmes movie, and it's like, okay,
Yeah. I honestly, the 5-channel thing. I grew up that way too. I still don't have cable now. I mean, of course. Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, we've all got streaming stuff, so I guess we all kind of have it. It's not like when we grew up. But yeah, like the 2-dial TVs, and like you get like the 3 channels pretty good, and the other one kind of shitty, and that's kind of how it was. Not to say it wasn't available then, but I was just out in the country and it wasn't really a thing.
But even in Chicago, man, no, you're right about that. You had the rabbit ears and stuff, and the UHF
exactly
come in as well as the single-digit channels. No, absolutely. Well, and again, I mean, I've got my 30 years in broadcasting and stuff. I can't help it. I'm a broadcast nerd, so I'm trying to see if there's any other. Oh, Dennis wanted to know regarding Last God, how Ricardo, the artist, the project.
God bless that dude. That was Amadeo as well. Amadeo had. So I wrote that Aquaman annual.
Mm-hmm.
And the artist on that was Max Fiumara, who is just amazing. I love that dude's work. So stylized, but so great. I was so proud of it. And I was waiting to get it to see it in the trade, for it to come out in the bound trade, and it did. And I couldn't wait to see it in that format. And then I confess I had not been reading the monthly Aquaman at that point. Or I did for, when I was researching the book, but after I wrote the story, I kind of fell off the series. And so when I opened the trade, Ricardo had been doing the monthly stuff. And I opened it up and I was like, Jesus, who's this guy? I'd never seen like this like a Dutch master, doing it's almost too good for comics. And blew me away. And
yes.
I love Max's work just as much, but it's so different. And Ricardo just really surprised me. And when Amadeo was asking me about doing the book, and we pitched it, and it went well, and they were like, "I think we're going to do this book, and it's going to get to be 12 issues." And we were just salivating to think about who we could get for the artist, and some great names came up. And Amadeo was like, "Well, let me ask Ricardo." And at first, we were talking about doing two artists for the two different timelines, which would have been a really cool approach, but made it also more complicated. Because there are some like ethereal moments where they don't fit exactly in either one. So we have to figure out what to do with that. But anyway, so you said Ricardo's name, and I was like, Jesus, can we get Ricardo? I figured he'd be doing Superman by now. Like he's, incredible. Yeah. And his style is so well suited to superhero stuff, but also to epic Conan style fantasy.
Totally, man. Yeah, very Wagnerian.
Yeah, and if you see his pre-DC stuff, he's also this horror savant. He's got this crazy imagination for horror stuff. I was like, dude, if you can get Ricardo, do anything to get Ricardo. But then we were talking about if we get Ricardo, who's going to do the other half? Like, who's going to? It would be so weird to have like somebody else who's super stylized would be so jarring against somebody like Ricardo. We have to find somebody who's kind of similar. So it kind of put this dilemma in front of us. Like, well, let's just see, he'll do the whole thing. And he said yes, and I was like, thank God for that, man. This book is so beautiful. I can't express it. Whoever's listening to this, please just even if you don't read a word of what I wrote, please look at Ricardo's art on this book because he is crushing it.
No, it's a gorgeous book, man. Yeah, absolutely. And it does fit the fantasy feel and everything. That's great. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, again, we're dancing around Robert Howard and stuff. I mean, would you love to do Conan? Would you love to do some of those Howard characters?
For sure. I love those books. I love that movie. I kind of don't own The Destroyer. I can't The Destroyer is the most tragic sequel ever in my book. But I love that first one. And
yeah, I just talked to Jerry Conway about that.
I know. Yeah, that'd be cool to talk to Jerry Conway about this stuff. When they made the new one, I was very optimistic. I love Jason Momoa too. I was hoping it would be great, and visually it was great. I thought one of the great things about the first movie was that he didn't talk much, and I thought it gave him this kind of larger than life epic. When he did talk, of course, there's the accent, and which fits perfectly into that whole world. Yeah. You don't have to explain anything. You just just makes sense. But when he was not speaking, it just made him so much more. I don't know. Like it just adds.
Yeah,
exactly. Gravitas. It has the gravitas. I was like, what if he just didn't speak much? So when he talks in that kind of bro American accent, it kind of broke the spell for me a little bit. He totally looks the part. There's a lot of cool stuff about that film in general. I kind of wish he hadn't spoken much. I thought that was really very effective in the first film. And when he talked, like saying in Destroyer, when Arnold was talking, whenever he's saying some dumb line, it just kind of breaks the spell of how, you want to see that king by his own hand, Conan.
Absolutely.
Now I know that Conan in the movie is not really Conan from the original books.
Sure.
A lot of that is like Cull stuff, They took a lot of Cull the Conqueror things.
Right about that. Yes, indeed.
And kind of made this, mashed it together into this other epic character. But it just that version of Conan is just so iconic now that I feel like that would be the one we'd kind of have to do in the book, like as they have been. I mean, they've been doing like the Jason Aaron run was great. I need to catch up on Jim. I have a great respect for Jim Zub, and I know he also loves Conan like I do. I've been meaning to get that story. I'm not yet, but I have all faith it's going to be great. But I love what Jason Aaron did with it.
Another Howard character that I love and I would love to see reinterpreted because unfortunately it is of its time in a lot of ways. Sailor Costigan, the merchant marine that's a boxer. And I don't know how much of those stories you've read. I know
it. I know of it. I have sadly not read any of it yet, but okay. I should. I do love Robert Howard, and it's just so much to read. I haven't got to it yet.
Yeah. I mean, over the years, there's just been great volumes of the few Costigan stories that are out there. Uh-huh. And I bought one that I adore, and I love the cover. And Gary Gianni had done the cover and also drew this incredible sailor, thing inside the book for me that I just adore as well. And yeah, I mean, just over the years when I've talked to the publishers that had the Conan license at the time, I'd be like, oh God, if I had my druthers, I would absolutely write a Sailor Costigan story because they're great. It's foreign intrigue. He's go from port to port, and he fights the big bad of each port that he goes to. And
that sounds like a perfect setup. So yeah, I'm gonna make a note to myself, like literally right now.
That'd be great.
How do you spell Costigan?
Costigan. Yeah, Costigan.
Okay.
Yeah, just like it sounds. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. Well, tell me about Marvel Zombies that just got underway.
Oh man, that was so fun. Jordan White reached out, the guy who's famously been editing the X-Men books with Hickman
and Star Wars books for a while as well.
Yeah, exactly. He reached out. He had read. I need to tip my hat to Ricky Purdon at Marvel. Like he was kind of like the talent seeker guy for a long time, and he got promoted. I think he's still kind of in that role, but he's a big shot there now because he's amazing and everyone loves him. But he found Warlords of Appalachia that I also did at Boom Studios and passed that around. And Jordan had read it and liked it, and they wanted. I guess I was getting a rep as I liked to world build. Because I'm sinking an unthinkable number of hours into Last God. Just the world building. It's just I put so much work into that, doing like the languages and the religions and the cultures and everything. It's just so much work, but I just love doing it. And Warlords was kind of like that too, right? It was a story about that take place after the Second American Civil War, and Kentucky's become an occupied nation in U.S. borders.
Wow.
And there's all this backstory. It takes place about a generation. Well, realistically, it's happening now. Essentially,
I was going to say, sadly.
Yeah, the first issue came out literally in October 2016, right before everything went down.
Yeah.
But it's kind of been coming true since then.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. I feel like I'm
the fiction, man. Sadly, reality is like overtaking, one lapping the fiction right now.
Yeah. Well, and ironically, Marvel Zombies was supposed to hit right during all this.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Was it delayed?
It was delayed. Well, the first issue prelude that we did was not delayed. That came out last Halloween Eve, actually.
Okay.
And then it was supposed to set up this miniseries that was going to come in the spring. That was going to come out weekly after that, which is why we had the delay. But then when COVID hit, they delayed it further because literally the first page of the miniseries was New York City in terror, like Times Square.
Yeah.
And they were. The last issue still had just like 10 pages to go or something on the art. It was basically done. But when Marvel started putting a halt on some of their books, they were looking at whatever wasn't finished, I think. And I'm sure there were other concerns as well. And I kind of wonder if the subject matter wouldn't also a factor.
Sure, the sensitivity of the time,
which I totally get.
Yeah.
So anyway. Yes, Jordan White reached out. He liked Warlords. He wanted somebody to do some world building and do a different take on Marvel Zombies, which I was too happy to do. I love horror, and I like the original series, but it's kind of not my brand. It was fun. It was like a fun zombie romp. You get to see your favorite heroes kind of cracking jokes and eating brains, and it was a cool, like fun concept as a one-off thing.
Yeah,
but that's been done now.
Sure.
I didn't really want to do it again, and I wanted to tell a story with real emotional stakes. And when they said they wanted to do a thing with a time jump, I was like, "That's great! Like we can tell we can build the world again in the image of Marvel Zombies, like show everything that happened." And
so tell people, give us the 10-cent pitch without spoiling.
Sure.
And involving the time jump. Tell us about it.
Well, it's not a continuation of the old series. It is completely new version of the story. So in this version, in the prelude, we get the Fantastic Four gets a message from Captain Marvel outside the solar system with an image that basically shows what looks like Galactus just floating and like waiting outside of our solar system, just hanging there. And it's unclear what's happened. But they theorize that he's either in Galactus is either in why would he be coming here? He's either in trouble and needs our help, or he's dead.
Wow.
What's happening? And so they send this team of the A team of the Marvel universe out there to see what's going on, because they're like, if he's dead, his body is all this crazy next gen tech that everyone's going to go and try to
Harvest
his corpse,
yeah
and Iron Man and Reed are like, well, shit, we're going to do that too. Like, we have to be first.
sure
So they send our heaviest hitters out there to see what happened with Galactus, and they explore his body. He is dead, and they explore they go inside of him to see what happened. And as you might expect, things go terribly wrong. And that's the prelude. And the last thing that we see, well, never mind, I can't say that. It's the prelude came out in October, so check it out.
Yeah.
But it basically sets up the concept of the new Marvel Zombies and the story that we wanted to tell. And then the miniseries, which is a 4-parter. The first issue is double size though, so 5-parter sort of.
Comes out next week or
the first issue came out a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And then issue 2 comes out next week, and then 3, 4, a couple weeks. So it's every couple of weeks after this next one. So the last one will come out right before Halloween. Excellent.
That's great. Go on.
Yeah, and well, after the prelude, it's like a time jump, and we see what Earth has become now. Like after the heroes found Galactus, then what happened, and we see what happened several years later. We follow a different cast of characters, of beloved Marvel characters, and what they're how they're trying to survive and what the world looks like. And as with Last God and Warlords, there's a lot of world building. We see a lot of hints as to what happened since then, and another religion also has arisen here.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a great time. Every issue shows another aspect of the world, like another region, but also another aspect of the Marvel universe to see. I want readers' questions of what happened to be answered chapter by chapter.
That sounds great, man. It's you and Tom Taylor. I give you guys a lot of credit and envious of you too. This is terrific because it gives you the opportunity to break a lot of windows when you're telling stories and stuff, and really no holds barred. And everyone shouldn't feel safe that their favorite hero is going to come out of this okay. And certainly with the time jump, God only knows what. Yeah,
exactly.
We
proved that in the prelude, but also with issue 1 here, we show you the cast, and they suffer losses. And I want everyone to understand that it's there are real emotional stakes here for the character. Like there's this big apocalyptic stuff, but also there's characters that and love, and no one's really safe in this world, and you're going to really feel the losses, but you're going to feel the wins as well. And I'm super proud of it. I never thought I'd be so proud of a zombie story. Like it's just, people think of those as like popcorn material. This one's not. I really wanted to take them, like if the original Marvel Zombies was Planet Terror by Robert Rodriguez, then this is like The Road.
That's great, man. Absolutely, yes. No,
so that was kind of the pitch. I was like, I want to do like a Cormac McCarthy version of Marvel Zombies.
That sounds great.
They totally let me, and Leonard Kirk crushes it on art.
Leonard Kirk, that's great, man. I saw it. I'm like, oh, he's amazing.
Yeah, that guy's so underrated. He's the best storyteller. His layouts are incredible. Every time his layouts came back, everything made sense. Anytime he makes a little change of stuff that I wrote in the script, it was always for the better. His art is so dynamic, which is a huge deal to me. Whenever you can see the motion in the artwork, that's the best. And that's just typifies his work. You can totally see the motion in everything. He's just the man. I love working with him.
I hear you, man. No, guys like Jeff Parker and Paul Cornell that have worked with him in the past all the time. No, he's iconic, and it's great to think of what he could do with a horror book and still have that iconic style he brings to his stories.
Exactly. Rochelle Rosenberg on colors too. They crushed it. I could not be prouder of the artwork. It just really felt like a team effort, and I'm super proud of that book.
That's great, man. Now you're going to join us in a couple of weeks at Baltimore Comic-Con?
Yes, I am.
Great, and I'm really glad that you said yes, and looking forward to having you on a panel of other Marvel people. And I think again, the zombie book right now will be a nice fit. But also we got a horror panel, so maybe you might do double duty. We'll see if you're able to. Yeah, man, it's the weekend. For people watching. It's going to be that weekend before Halloween. It's Friday the 23rd through Sunday the 25th of October. And we got a lot of cool panels that we've set up, and among them will be Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Phil, I really appreciate getting to know you in this conversation. And
you too, John. I've been watching the show forever, and I've been donating on the Patreon, which I encourage everyone else to do. And
thank you. Seriously, I appreciate you mentioning that, and I noticed that, and I thank you for the support. And man, no, honestly, it's a pleasure getting to know you and really come back not only for Baltimore Comic Con, but whatever's cooking and everything and new stories. I'm hoping to hear what you got coming up. But Killer Man is great. Aftershock, it comes out in October. Marvel Zombies up and running. Marvel Zombies Aftermath, correct?
Marvel Zombies Resurrection.
Resurrection. Pardon me.
No, you're good.
But there you go. And Jesus, I gotta look back at the Boom stuff too, man. All that.
Oh, thanks, man.
And of course, Last God. Jesus, amazing story.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're very proud of that one too.
Congratulations, man. I'm glad things are going well. And seriously, I want to hear the music. I really
yeah, I'll send you some links. I have my stuff is on YouTube and social media, and actually the Army Field Band let me do a video just featuring the music from my comics, which was really cool.
That's amazing.
That's going to go on their YouTube channel next Wednesday, I think. So I'll send you a link to that as well.
Please do. And where are you social media wise? Because I wasn't sure where you were on Twitter, for example, or if you're on Twitter.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I am. I'm on social. Let's see, Facebook's my full name. Twitter, it's at Phillip K. Johnson, 2 L's in Phillip, all one word.
That's what screwed me up was the 2 L's, indeed.
Yeah, sorry. And let's see. Instagram, my full name with underscores between the words. And I think that's it. Yeah. And my website, phillipkennellyjohnson.com.
That's beautiful, man. That's excellent. Seriously, what a great rounded career you got going. That's wonderful.
Thanks so much. Well, you too, sir. It's been a pleasure seeing your stuff, and I look forward to seeing, everyone you got on here.
Absolutely. Well, Phillip, we'll stay in touch and give you more details on Baltimore Comic Con. In fact, I've got a planning meeting in less than an hour with the guys, mapping out all the panels and figuring out where we're going to put them. But
burning the oil.
Congratulations. Seriously, great writing, and looking forward to hearing the music, and I wouldn't want to mess with you in an alley.
All right. Well, I don't know. trying to keep in shape during COVID. We'll see how it goes.
I hear you, man. Phillip Kennedy Johnson, thanks very much. Take care, man.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right, everybody. There you go. It was a great conversation with Phillip, and it's going to be an active week here at Word Balloon. Tomorrow, I'll be talking to my guys, Mitch and Franco, and we're going to look at Star Trek Lower Decks and look at the latest episode. We'll see if we like it or not. And then later in the evening, of course, it's To the Outer Limits with Gabe Hardman and Jeff Parker, and we'll see who else will be joining us as we talk about episode, I want to say 8 or 9. I can't remember right now. And I can't even give you the title right now, but it'll be a fun late night conversation on Thursday. Friday, as I was telling Phillip, a horror trivia panel, Mike Marisi, Tim Seeley, possibly Sarah Beatty, which is going to be great having Sarah on. I'm hoping I reach out to a couple other people. We'll see if we get them. I'm just going to MC. It's you guys and the creators doing what they can with the horror genre. But I hope you'll join me this week for more Word Balloon Live.